The speedrun of System Shock 2 can easily be confusing to those who have never played the game before, and almost as confusing to those who have. Proportionally a huge amount of the normal gameplay is skipped, reducing a game that took me around 13 hours to beat casually, down to less than 12 minutes. As a note, if you haven't played it yet, you probably should before watching this. I decided to make this video to help explain exactly what's going on, both for prospective speedrunners and those who are simply interested. Let's talk about versions for a second. As of 2017, the version of the game on Steam had some changes made to it that were mostly neutral for the speedrun, with some small changes that negatively impact it and one that slightly speeds it up. The total difference can be measured in seconds, but I believe the Steam version is currently slower. For this reason, and because of its classical use, I speedrun on Good Old Games version 2.4. And one more quick thing to note, you won't notice any cutscenes playing in the speedrun. That's because we decided a long time ago to prevent them from playing to make the speedrun timing a bit more consistent. Since they're just video files in a folder, it's generally accepted to rename the folder and have them automatically be skipped. With that out of the way, let's start the run. We choose to start on impossible difficulty to make a certain trick easier a bit later. What's important to know right now is that difficulty affects our health and psi pool, as well as how many cyber modules it costs to upgrade or purchase a skill.
Welcome to the Ramsey Center.
So right away you'll notice I'm moving diagonally. That's because holding forward and a strafe key at the same time is around 30% faster than just running forward normally. This is a common bug in older games caused by the strafe speed and forward speed being combined.
If you've completed basic training, here's where you make your choice, soldier. Here's where you enlist in one of the three.
Here we choose to go with the OSA instead of the Navy or Marines simply because it lets us get the skills and stats we need the most. Psi abilities are vital to the speedrun, so starting with the Psi Amp and useful Psi powers is a huge boon.
The sensory deprivation tanks aboard the TOS Runang await you. A year in meditation on the nature of sifting the thoughts of treachery and disloyalty from the morass of emotion and internal conflict that fill most mundanes can be disquieting. You shall spend a year.
This definitely needs some explaining. What I'm about to do is make a quick save right before hitting the final trigger here, which would normally give me the training stats it describes and then transport me to the next map. After closing the dialog box and the level begins to load in, I press the escape key until the game quits to the main menu. This is a feature I assume was left in case a player was stuck loading and couldn't exit the game. The side effect of doing this is that until the game is completely reset, all level change triggers no longer function. This can be used in this specific circumstance to continually pass through the trigger that adds to our stats without being forced out of the level. It takes 5 total passes to do this. The first one we do doesn't count since we load a save before it. Then we pass through it 4 times and make a save before the trigger 1 more time. Then when we reset the game and load the save and pass through the trigger a final time, we finally arrive on the Von Braun. Now is a good time to go over the 3 psi powers we start with: projected cryokinesis, psychogenic agility, and kinetic redirection. These are kind of fancy names, so I'll mostly just refer to the latter two as agility and psi pull. Cryokinesis is a standard projectile attack which we use to occasionally break an obstacle or attack an enemy. Agility is a power we use at the start of every level because it gives us +2 to our agility stat, which increases our speed. And psi pull is used in one instance later on, which I'll mention when it comes up. Right at the start we jump into and slide up this vent instead of breaking it as intended. It just saves a bit of time over climbing the ladder. We grab the wrench here for one use later on where we don't want to use cryokinesis. I'll mention it then. Now's a good time to talk about nanites and cyber modules. The former acts as currency and the latter acts as skill points. In the speedrun, nanites are only used with the psi power we get later that lets us duplicate certain items. With the current route, you'll likely end up with some extra at the end, but most take a fraction of a second or no time at all to grab, so it's not a huge issue. Cyber modules are used for some mandatory research at one point, as well as increasing our heavy weapons skill and acquiring 3 more psi powers. They end up being a limiting factor of the speedrun, so every one collected until about halfway through the speedrun is required. This is where we get our first 2 speed boosters, which are commonly referred to as speed hypos. They double your speed when used and last for 20 seconds, and will be what we spend all of our nanites on to duplicate. Here I overcharge a psi power which causes damage to yourself. The reason I do this will be explained shortly. What's up next is the most important glitch of the speedrun, the invincibility glitch. It not only makes us invulnerable for the rest of the game, but also changes our hitbox for a while and helps set up another glitch later. Its execution is fairly simple, you just load another map while you're dying. However, to be able to move, you need to touch a ladder after you've been killed, This can be a bit tricky, but thankfully this area is set up perfectly to execute the trick, and it's right at the start of the game. Because of the difficulty setting and our self-damage a moment ago, one hit from the robotic enemy in this area will put us in a health range where another site overload will kill us. If we get hit, start running forward, and kill ourselves. Immediately after death, we land on the ladder, able to move again, and can travel down into engineering. Let's go over the plan for engineering. Sorry for my crude graphic here, but I hope it helps. The player's goal on the engineering deck is to reset the engine core so that they can use the elevator to reach other decks. Normally this would involve accomplishing multiple goals in engineering, which would eventually allow you into the engine room to do what you need to do there. In the last 2 months, a thief speedrunner by the name of Psychosis mentioned that he had tried using a certain clipping technique from that game, which shares the same engine, in SS2, and that it had worked. Another user by the name Black Secret then posted a video showing it used to specifically clip through the last locked door in engineering, a goal I and some others had been trying to accomplish for a very long time. I'll explain their method in a bit, but I don't use it in the speedrun because I found another method which is questionably slower, but I found it while looking for a faster way to do it. It involves being hit specifically by a shotgun hybrid. The engineering route you'll see revolves around getting one that spawns in a set location over to the door we need to clip through. While we're in that area, we complete an objective to gain some Siren modules and pick up some chemicals we'll need for research later. The pink line represents our first trip into the map, and the blue line represents backtracking to the radiation door that we need to clip through. The orange line represents the route that used to be taken until recently, where most of the quest objectives in engineering had to be completed. So you'll probably notice that now my view is really tilted here. That's an effect of the glitch we just did. It's random how much it tilts, but in this case we got kind of a moderate tilt. You can easily correct it though just by using the center camera keybind. You have to jump to activate this door because the trigger is placed slightly above our noticeably diminished height. By getting to this point quickly, the shotgun hybrid won't spot you and will continue on his patrol path. He can go in one of 3 directions as shown here. Obviously the second and third options are the fastest for getting him out of the area, but there seems to be a bias for the first option.
Eyes open for utility storage 4. I've laid in some supplies there. The passcode is 5900. They're not easy to locate.
Sadly, as we attempt to get this enemy to the door we need him at, he will often get stuck unless we monitor him closely. I don't have an exact plan of how I do this, but every so often I let him get close enough to shoot, which seems to reset his pathfinding. At some point here, it's a good idea to switch difficulty down to easy. At a minimum, this needs to be done before we need to boost our research skill on the next deck. We have to run in and touch this ladder because we jumped earlier. While in the state we're in, jumping disables leaning until touching a ladder. I'm not really sure why that's the case, but it is how it is. Finally, we're at the door we need to clip through. I don't have an exact science for this, but a consistent way I've found to do it is to hold forward against the door, turn very slightly to the left, wait to begin being shot by the hybrid, then begin holding lean forward as well. After a few shots you should lean through the door and be able to open it from the other side. I'm going to take a moment now to mention the other method you can use to clip through that door, which is using the wrench's melee attack. It involves lifting yourself off the ground slightly by standing on an object with your back to the door, swinging the wrench, then leaning to the right against the wall and mantling an invisible hitbox created by the wrench, which moves you slightly backwards into the door. This method seems technically faster, but also difficult to execute and might cause time loss later on.
Good work. The engine core is now back online. Now get to the elevator and come see me on deck 4. While you were doing that, I've discovered the presence of some analyte artifacts on board the ship.
Now it's time for the hydroponics overview. The overall goal of this deck is to find and research 4 vials of Toxin A and insert them into the 4 air regulators. I've marked the Toxin A as green rectangles and the regulators as purple rectangles. There are 2 regulators in the first map we enter, as well as 1 in each of the 2 hydroponics submaps. There are more than enough Toxin A vials on the deck, so we just pick up the ones that are most convenient to us. A lot of stuff happens in Hydro, but I'll try to keep the video moving. The first thing we need to do is hit a trigger by getting close to a vial of Toxin A so that a timer starts that will end with us getting 10 cyber modules. We need these to speed up research, which is our first real goal on the deck. We grabbed this research software here to increase our research speed. Because we are rather compact at the moment, getting over this desk and through the window is difficult. It requires bouncing off the rather inaccurate chair hitbox. By using the research boosting implant here, we can begin research with no points invested in the skill. Because we picked up the research software before this, our effective research skill is 2, which sets us up to provide a needed chemical at just the right time. Now we use an exploit that helps immensely with the speedrun. Anytime you spend points at an upgrade terminal, you can refund them if you hit the undo button before closing the window. Since we're already researching Toxin A, the points we put into the research skill are used to speed it up, and as soon as it's finished researching, we can refund all of the valuable modules. We immediately use the same exploit in a different application. If you get a new psi power, switch to it and then refund the modules used to get it, you can use that psi power normally until you change it to another, at which point it will no longer be available. Here we get molecular duplication, or just duplication. This is the reason we've been gathering nanites throughout the run and why we've been holding on to a single speed hypo without using it. Now as long as we have the nanites and psi points for it, we can create as many speed hypos as we want. We'll specifically not switch out of duplication while on this map so that we have an opportunity to create enough speed hypos to tide us over until we acquire the skill for real at the end of the deck. Here we finally use the wrench in order to break this glass, since switching to cryokinesis would lose us duplication. Here we pick up the grenade launcher and 6 rounds of standard ammo for it. This will be what we use to kill the final boss. For a variety of reasons, this seems like the best method to do it in the current speedrun route.
This is Xerxes. Please report any electrical anomalies to your director.
Here we use psi pull to grab some modules sitting up on a ledge. It's possible to get these just by using a speed hypo at the start and then ramp up to them, but this method both looks cooler and helps extend the range of our speed hypo. We don't actually pick them up though until we leave the map.
Do you think this is some kind of game? It is only through luck and my continued forbearance that you're even alive.
Now we get our 5th psi power, which has huge implications for the speedrun. It's called Quantum Relocation, or just Relocate for short. Using the power once sets down a marker, and using it again teleports you back to that marker. While this is certainly useful, its main use is for clipping. Primary method of doing this is to stand or crouch in front of some sloped terrain, and then place a relocation marker while mantling onto the terrain. This places the marker lower than it would normally, and by holding crouch when you teleport back to it, you will partially clip through the ground. As we'll see later, further relocations can take you out of the map entirely.
This is Xerxes. Why do you let the Metal Mother guide your actions? Why do you not join the glory of the mass?
We can add the duplicate power and make our way to the next deck.
Readings indicate the elevator shaft is clear. Now get up to deck 4. I'll be waiting for you.
Here we very quickly skip the entirety of the recreation deck by using our stored prone potential from being essentially a living corpse. By simply placing a relocation marker, mantling to stretch our legs, and then relocating, we can drop through the floor. This is valuable here because no other methods of relocation clipping are available to allow us to pass through the door. You'll notice I don't use a speed hypo right away here. That's because whenever you pick up a speed hypo while already under the effects of one, it gets immediately cancelled. For this reason, I choose to wait until after picking up the one on the corpse ahead before using one. Now we have a long straight run to finish any speed hypo duplications we need for the rest of the speedrun. 6 gives us enough to make use of them anytime it would be optimal to do so, but it's good to get 7 if you can, in case you make any mistakes. Here we do a secondary method of a relocation clip. By jumping into the side of a raised platform like this and pulling ourselves up, it essentially creates the same effect as using sloped terrain. It's important to jump out of the ground here to hit a trigger that gives us 30 cyber modules, which are vital for getting the rest of the skills we need. We pick up imposed neural restructuring here for use once at the end of this map. Normally the main goal of this area would be to destroy the black and red eggs that are all over the map so that we could leave, but by using a clip to pass through the exit door we can ignore this objective.
So you must listen. I have the unique advantage of seeing this whole situation from every...
For some reason this button opens a door we need to pass that normally requires a key card, which is certainly convenient.
creatures, those corruptors of mind and body. I've managed to cleanse myself of their putrescence, but I've been...
So here's a fun fact. You'll notice we're still getting generic Cyber Module achievement messages at this point from Polito, even though in a casual playthrough it would be Shodan speaking to us. It's because we skip a trigger by not finding out that Polito is dead in the speedrun, so the messages never get changed over.
Here are some more cyber modules. Spend them wisely. They're not easy to locate.
This is a complicated clip to pull off since the area to do it in is so small and the Rumbler in this room is highly aggressive. We use neural restructuring on him to keep him from interfering. Another semi-tricky clip since the pipe here gets in the way and we have to approach it diagonally.
The Nanites have tried my patience for the final time.
We cannot separate
The many hold sway here.
This relocation clip can be difficult because the spider here really likes to get in your way.
You are on your own.
This skip is kinda crazy, and because I can only guess at some of the mechanics of how the game actually works, you'll have to bear with me. I explained earlier that when you do a relocation clip, you're only halfway out of bounds. Your top half is still in the game map. Because of certain geometry in the game, it's possible to disconnect your top half, which can lean, attack, and use items in the world, from your bottom half, which moves you around, jumps, and determines how close you are to an actual object for interaction purposes. This scenario can happen much more frequently when you're clipped into the ground. Here we use this disconnect to send our lower body on a speedy trajectory up and over almost the entire map. Here's a visual taken from the editor since there is no in-game map for this area. The green arrow represents where we are now, and the red arrow represents where we hope to land. There's something of a setup for getting this trick to work, and you can see me trying and failing it here, because it's very precise and usually faster to just brute force it a bit than try to set it up perfectly. I relocate after a certain amount of time has passed, which I measure using the flashing light on the wall. During the entire tilting period, the lower half of my player character was moving upwards and towards the end of the level very quickly. The moment I relocate, my entire body is fully out of bounds and I start to fall. The trajectory is calculated so that I should end up falling directly in front of the level change trigger. Two things to point out here. One, you may have seen me using side pull in the air just then. Anytime you use a side power, you move slightly in the direction you're facing. It can be useful here for minute course correction. I also forgot to do something here that loses me a few seconds. Since you're not busy in midair, it's the perfect time to reload your grenade launcher, since at this point it still only has the single grenade it starts with. You can still load it even though you can't equip it at this point. At this point, we're basically done. All we have left is to get our heavy skill up as high as we can get it, do a rather tricky clip into the terrain, and then fall into Shodan's little shielded area. Luckily for us, she didn't bother putting a roof over her head.
The Von Braun's faster than light travel can be used to create pockets of proto-reality.
I am now using...
And that's it. Thanks for watching, everyone. I know I couldn't cover every detail, so if you have any questions, leave them below and I will do my best to answer them. See you later.